Someone hired someone to spy on you, and what that spy discovered about you shocked them so deeply that they could not keep the secret anymore. Listen carefully, because if you clicked on this message, do not leave before the very end. There was something about you that someone wanted to investigate. They wanted answers about your life. They wanted to know who you were talking to. They wanted to know where you were going. They wanted to know whether you had moved on. They wanted to know whether you were still thinking about someone. But they were expecting to discover weakness. They were expecting to discover loneliness. They were expecting to discover that you were secretly falling apart. Instead, they discovered something they never expected. They discovered that the person they were watching was becoming stronger. They discovered that you were not chasing the person you loved. You were not begging for attention. You were not forcing a connection. You were not destroying yourself to make someone stay. You were becoming silent. You were becoming distant. You were becoming different. And that difference frightened someone. Because when a person stops chasing, people who were comfortable being chased suddenly become afraid of losing them. And there is something even more shocking. The person who was watching you eventually realized that the story they had been told about you was not true. They had been told that you were desperate. They had been told that you were obsessed. They had been told that you could never move forward. They had been told that you were the one who needed the other person. But the spy watched you. And the spy saw the truth. You were healing. You were rebuilding. You were becoming stronger in private. And the person who hired that spy was not prepared for what happened next. Before I continue, do something very simple. If you believe that God can reveal what is hidden and protect you from what you cannot see, write, "I trust God," in the comments. Do not write it because someone told you to. Write it only if you genuinely mean it. Because sometimes your strongest statement is not a long explanation. Sometimes it is simply saying, "I trust God," even when I do not understand what is happening. And if you are listening from the United States right now, from a quiet bedroom, from your car, from your workplace, from a lonely apartment, from a city where nobody knows what you have been carrying inside, hear this message as a dramatic spiritual reminder of faith, not as a claim that I am literally speaking from heaven. Imagine this message as a voice of encouragement inspired by the teachings of Jesus and the protection traditionally associated with Archangel Michael. The message is simple. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. And what happened behind your back does not have the power to determine your future. Someone may have watched you. Someone may have talked about you. Someone may have tried to understand your next move. But nobody can control what God is preparing for you. There are people who become uncomfortable when they cannot understand you. They become uncomfortable when you stop explaining yourself. They become uncomfortable when you stop reacting. They become uncomfortable when your silence becomes stronger than their accusations. And perhaps that is exactly what happened. Someone wanted information about you. They wanted to know whether you were still emotionally attached. They wanted to know whether you were waiting. They wanted to know whether you were going to reach out. They wanted to know whether you were still looking at old photographs. They wanted to know whether you were still checking a phone. They wanted to know whether your heart was still available. But the person watching you saw something completely different. They saw you changing. They saw you waking up. They saw you becoming more careful with your energy. They saw you choosing peace over arguments. They saw you choosing silence over explanations. They saw you becoming less interested in proving yourself. And that is where everything changed. Because the spy realized something. You were never the weak person in this story. You were simply the person who loved deeply. There is a difference. A person who loves deeply may cry deeply. They may care deeply. They may remember deeply. But that does not mean they are weak. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who can love someone and still walk away when staying would destroy their peace. Sometimes strength looks like deleting the message you wanted to send. Sometimes strength looks like refusing to beg. Sometimes strength looks like letting someone misunderstand you. Sometimes strength looks like saying, "I love you, but I will not lose myself trying to make you choose me." And perhaps someone discovered exactly that about you. They discovered that you were changing. They discovered that your heart was becoming wiser. They discovered that your silence was not emptiness. Your silence was healing. And the person who hired the spy began to become nervous. Because they thought they were gathering information about you. Instead, they discovered information about themselves. They discovered that they had underestimated you. They discovered that they had believed the wrong people. They discovered that they had allowed fear, jealousy, pride, or insecurity to influence their decisions. And now they were watching you from a distance, wondering whether they had made the biggest mistake of their life. Maybe you have noticed strange changes. Maybe someone suddenly became interested in you again. Maybe someone who ignored you is suddenly watching your social media. Maybe someone who disappeared is suddenly finding reasons to appear. Maybe someone is asking mutual friends about you. Maybe someone who once acted like they did not care is suddenly trying to discover whether you are still available. But listen carefully. Do not let curiosity pull you backward. Do not mistake someone's attention for transformation. Do not confuse someone's regret with genuine repentance. Do not confuse someone's jealousy with love. And never allow someone else's fear of losing you to become the reason you lose yourself again. If someone wants to return to your life, let their actions speak. Let consistency speak. Let honesty speak. Let accountability speak. Let changed behavior speak. Because words can be beautiful. Words can be emotional. Words can sound like everything you wanted to hear. But character is revealed through action. And this is where the spiritual message becomes important. Jesus taught love, forgiveness, truth, humility, and mercy. Forgiveness does not mean allowing someone to repeatedly hurt you. Mercy does not mean abandoning wisdom. Love does not require you to surrender your boundaries. And faith does not require you to ignore reality. Sometimes God protects you by allowing a door to close. Sometimes protection feels like rejection. Sometimes redirection feels like heartbreak. Sometimes silence feels like abandonment. But what you call a delay may become the very thing that saves you from walking into the wrong future. Think about how many times you thought something was the end. You thought the relationship was the end. You thought the opportunity was the end. You thought the rejection was the end. You thought the betrayal was the end. You thought nobody would ever understand you again. And yet you are still here. You survived the nights you thought would break you. You survived conversations you never thought you would recover from. You survived people who promised forever and then disappeared. You survived the version of yourself that believed you had to earn someone's love. And now you are learning something new. You do not have to convince someone to value you. You do not have to perform for love. You do not have to compete for attention. You do not have to become someone else to be chosen. The right people will not require you to destroy yourself to prove that you care. And perhaps that is the shocking truth the spy discovered. You were not waiting for someone to rescue you. You were learning how to stand on your own. You were learning how to pray without demanding an answer. You were learning how to sleep without waiting for a notification. You were learning how to wake up without checking whether someone had finally returned. You were learning how to live again. And somebody noticed. They noticed your silence. They noticed your strength. They noticed your distance. They noticed that you were no longer reacting the way you used to. And suddenly, the person who thought they had control realized they had lost it. But there is something you need to understand. Do not build your future around the possibility that someone will come back. Build your future around the certainty that you belong to God and that your life has value with or without someone's approval. If they return, let them meet the healed version of you. If they do not return, let your healing continue. If they apologize, listen carefully. If they change, watch consistently. If they manipulate, step away. If they love you genuinely, they will not need to control you. They will respect your boundaries. They will respect your peace. They will respect your dignity. And they will not need a spy to understand you. A person who truly wants to know your heart should have the courage to ask you directly. That is why the revelation is so powerful. The spy was looking for secrets. But what they found was character. They were looking for evidence of weakness. But they found resilience. They were looking for evidence that you were still trapped. But they discovered that you were becoming free. And perhaps the person who hired them is now asking themselves a question they never expected to ask. What if I lost someone who was actually good for me? What if the person I ignored was the person who genuinely cared? What if the person I treated as an option was the person who would have stood beside me? What if I confused peace with weakness? What if I confused kindness with desperation? What if I pushed away someone because I was afraid of getting close? Those questions can become painful. But they can also become the beginning of truth. And perhaps someone is finally facing the truth about themselves. Maybe they are realizing that they were jealous. Maybe they are realizing that they were insecure. Maybe they are realizing that they listened to people who did not have your best interests at heart. Maybe they are realizing that they allowed another person's opinion to influence a relationship that should have been based on honesty. Maybe they are realizing that they judged you without knowing your heart. And now they are watching from a distance. But you do not need to perform for their realization. You do not need to post something just to make them jealous. You do not need to show how happy you are just to make someone regret losing you. Your healing does not need an audience. Your peace does not need proof. Your progress does not need applause. Let God see it. Let your life reveal it. And let time expose everything that words tried to hide. There is a reason you may feel different lately. You may not have the same patience for confusion. You may not have the same tolerance for mixed signals. You may not feel the same desire to explain yourself. You may be less interested in people who only appear when they need something. That is not necessarily bitterness. Sometimes it is maturity. You are learning that peace is expensive. And you should stop giving it away to people who do not know how to protect it. Imagine Archangel Michael standing as a symbol of courage and protection. Not as a magical replacement for your choices. Not as a guarantee that every problem will disappear. But as a powerful image of spiritual strength. A reminder that fear does not have to rule your decisions. A reminder that you can stand firm. A reminder that you can say no. A reminder that you can leave what harms you. A reminder that you can choose truth over manipulation. And now imagine the message of courage being spoken directly to your heart. Do not be afraid of what was revealed. Do not be afraid of what people discovered. Do not be afraid of who talked about you. Do not be afraid of who misunderstood you. You do not need to chase every rumor. You do not need to answer every accusation. You do not need to defend yourself against every person who has already decided what they want to believe. Sometimes the strongest response is a life that contradicts the lie. Let your character answer. Let your consistency answer. Let your peace answer. Let your future answer. There are moments when silence becomes more powerful than 1,000 explanations. And maybe you are entering one of those moments. The person who hired the spy may have wanted to know what you were doing. But now they may be wondering what you are becoming. That is a completely different question. Because your future is not a repeat of your past. You are not required to become the person you were before the heartbreak. You are allowed to become wiser. You are allowed to become more selective. You are allowed to love differently. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to say, that behavior is not acceptable in my life anymore. And you are allowed to forgive someone without giving them the same access to you. That distinction will change your life. Forgiveness can free your heart. Boundaries can protect your future. And faith can help you walk forward without needing to know every detail. Maybe you have been asking God why someone left. Maybe you have been asking why someone changed. Maybe you have been asking why the relationship became confusing. Maybe you have been asking why you were ignored after giving so much. And perhaps the answer is not coming in the form you expected. Maybe the answer is not, they will come back. Maybe the answer is, you will become okay whether they come back or not. That is a deeper miracle. Because imagine reaching the point where your peace is no longer controlled by another person's behavior. Imagine waking up and not needing their message. Imagine seeing their name and not feeling your entire body change. Imagine remembering the relationship without wanting to return to the pain. Imagine being grateful for what it taught you without wishing to relive it. That is freedom. And perhaps the spy discovered that you were already moving toward it. The person watching you expected to find someone broken. Instead, they found someone rebuilding. They expected to find someone desperate. Instead, they found someone becoming disciplined. They expected to find someone waiting. Instead, they found someone living. And now the person who hired them has a problem. Because information cannot create control when the person being watched has already surrendered their life to God. You cannot manipulate someone who no longer needs your approval. You cannot control someone who knows their worth. You cannot intimidate someone who has survived their deepest fear. And you cannot destroy someone who has learned how to begin again. So if someone has been talking about you, let them talk. If someone misunderstood you, let time reveal the truth. If someone underestimated you, let your future surprise them. If someone walked away, do not run after them. If someone returns, do not immediately open every door. Use wisdom. Watch their behavior. Listen to their words. Look for consistency. And above all, protect your peace. Because not every person who returns deserves the same version of you. Sometimes people return because they miss your energy. Sometimes they return because nobody else treated them the way you did. Sometimes they return because they finally understand your value. And sometimes they return because they are lonely. You need wisdom to know the difference. That is why faith and discernment must walk together. Do not let loneliness make decisions for you. Do not let nostalgia make decisions for you. Do not let chemistry make decisions for you. Do not let someone else's regret make decisions for you. Let truth make the decision. Let character make the decision. Let peace make the decision. And let God guide your heart. If this message is speaking directly to something you have experienced, write one word in the comments. Peace. Not because a comment will magically change your life. But because sometimes publicly choosing peace is a reminder to yourself that you are finished negotiating with chaos. Write peace if you are done chasing explanations from people who refuse to be honest. Write peace if you are done begging for clarity. Write peace if you are choosing yourself without becoming cruel. Write peace if you are trusting that what is meant for your life will not require you to destroy your dignity. And keep listening. Because there is another layer to this. The shocking truth was not simply that you were stronger than they expected. The shocking truth was that you were never as alone as you believed. During the moments when nobody understood what you were going through, your faith was still there. During the nights when you cried silently, your prayers still mattered. During the mornings when you forced yourself to get out of bed and continue, that was strength. During the moments when you wanted to send one final message but chose silence instead, that was growth. You may have thought nothing was happening. But something was happening inside you. You were becoming someone who could no longer be easily manipulated by temporary emotions. You were becoming someone who understood that love without respect is not enough. You were becoming someone who understood that connection without honesty is not enough. You were becoming someone who understood that apologies without changed behavior are not enough. And perhaps that is why someone is suddenly curious about you. Because people often become interested in your value after they lose access to it. But remember this. You do not need to become unavailable to become valuable. You were valuable before they noticed. You were valuable before they regretted it. You were valuable before the spy reported anything. You were valuable before the relationship. You were valuable during the relationship. You were valuable after the relationship. Your worth was never created by another person's attention. And it cannot be destroyed by another person's rejection. That is one of the most important truths you can carry forward. Your worth is not a notification. Your worth is not a phone call. Your worth is not a relationship status. Your worth is not somebody else's opinion. Your worth is deeper. And when you finally understand that, people lose the power to control your emotions with attention and withdrawal. They cannot make you feel valuable by coming closer. They cannot make you worthless by walking away. You remain you. And your life continues. Maybe that is the secret they discovered. Not that you stopped caring. But that you finally started caring about yourself too. And there is a huge difference. You can love another person and still love yourself. You can forgive someone and still have boundaries. You can miss someone and still refuse to return to the same situation. You can wish someone well and still walk in another direction. You can remember the good without denying the bad. You can be grateful for the lesson without reopening the wound. That is maturity. That is healing. And that is where your next chapter begins. So if someone is watching you, let them see growth. If someone is talking about you, let them eventually run out of lies. If someone is waiting for you to break, let them discover that you learned how to stand. If someone expects you to chase them, let them discover that you no longer chase what does not choose you. If someone wants to return, let them approach with honesty. And if they never return, keep walking. Because your destiny cannot be reduced to one person. Your life is larger than one relationship. Your future is larger than one rejection. Your calling is larger than one heartbreak. And your relationship with God is deeper than one unanswered question. Do not let one painful chapter convince you that the entire book is finished. It is not finished. You are still becoming. You are still learning. You are still growing. You are still capable of loving. You are still capable of being loved. And you are still capable of receiving something healthier than what you lost. But before you move forward, there is one thing you must release. The need to know everything. You may never know exactly what someone said about you. You may never know who showed them your information. You may never know why they asked questions. You may never know what conversation happened behind closed doors. And you may never know exactly what the spy discovered. But you can know this. You do not need every detail to choose peace. You do not need every answer to move forward. You do not need every confession to heal. You do not need every apology to become free. Sometimes closure is not something another person gives you. Sometimes closure is something you decide. You decide that you will no longer carry what happened. You decide that you will no longer punish yourself for loving. You decide that you will no longer blame yourself for someone else's choices. You decide that you will learn. You decide that you will grow. You decide that you will trust God with what you cannot control. And then you walk. One day at a time. One decision at a time. One prayer at a time. One boundary at a time. And eventually, you look back and realize that the person you were desperately trying to hold onto was not the only thing you lost. You also lost the version of yourself who tolerated less than you deserved. And that version does not have to come back. Let that sink in. You do not have to become who you were before. You can become better. You can become calmer. You can become wiser. You can become stronger. You can become more compassionate without becoming easier to manipulate. You can become more loving without becoming more available to disrespect. You can become more forgiving without becoming more vulnerable to repeated harm. That is strength. That is wisdom. That is growth. And perhaps the person who hired the spy is now realizing something painful. They thought they were investigating you. But they were actually witnessing your transformation. They thought they were collecting evidence against you. But they were collecting evidence that their assumptions were wrong. They thought they would find you waiting. But they found you walking. They thought they would find you broken. But they found you rebuilding. They thought they would find you desperate. But they found you learning peace. And now they may have to live with the realization that they misunderstood someone they should have valued. But that realization belongs to them. Your healing belongs to you. Do not make their regret your responsibility. Do not sit around waiting for someone to regret losing you. Do not measure your progress by whether they return. Measure your progress by whether you can sleep peacefully. Measure your progress by whether you can look in the mirror and respect yourself. Measure your progress by whether you can walk away from disrespect. Measure your progress by whether you can forgive without forgetting the lesson. Measure your progress by whether you can love without losing yourself. That is the real victory. And if someone is meant to walk beside you, they will have to meet you at the level of honesty, respect, and maturity you now require. Not because you are demanding perfection. Because you have learned the cost of accepting confusion. There is a reason you have become more selective. There is a reason certain conversations no longer excite you. There is a reason certain people no longer have the same access to your emotions. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming conscious. There is a difference. Coldness says, I will never love again. Wisdom says, I will love, but I will also pay attention. Coldness says, nobody can be trusted. Wisdom says, trust must be earned. Coldness says, I do not care. Wisdom says, I care, but I will not abandon myself. And perhaps you are learning that distinction right now. So breathe. Slow down. You do not need to figure out the entire future tonight. You do not need to know who will return. You do not need to know what they are thinking. You do not need to know what the spy said word for word. You need to know who you are becoming. You need to know what kind of life you want. You need to know what kind of love you are willing to accept. And you need to know what you will no longer tolerate. That is enough for today. If this message reached you at exactly the moment you needed it, leave "I choose peace" in the comments. Let that be your declaration. Not a prediction. Not a promise of supernatural certainty. A decision. I choose peace. I choose wisdom. I choose truth. I choose healthy love. I choose boundaries. I choose forgiveness without self-abandonment. I choose faith without fear. I choose to move forward. And if somebody who once underestimated you eventually sees this stronger version of you, let them understand something. You did not become stronger to make them regret you. You became stronger because you deserved to heal. You did not become peaceful to make them jealous. You became peaceful because chaos was costing you too much. You did not stop chasing to manipulate them. You stopped chasing because you finally understood that love should not have to be begged for. And if they come back, let them come back with truth. If they apologize, let the apology be followed by action. If they ask for another chance, let the chance come with accountability. And if they do not come back, let that absence become space for something healthier. Because your future does not depend on someone else's decision. Your future depends on the decisions you make now. The door behind you may have closed. But that does not mean God has abandoned you. It may simply mean you are being invited to stop staring at the closed door. Turn around. Look forward. There is still life ahead. There are still mornings ahead. There are still people you have not met. There are still conversations you have not had. There are still opportunities you cannot see. There are still prayers whose answers have not arrived. There are still parts of yourself waiting to be discovered. So do not spend the rest of your life trying to understand why someone watched you. Spend your life becoming someone who no longer needs to be understood by everyone. Let people misunderstand you if they choose. Let people talk. Let people speculate. Let people wonder. Your job is not to control every story people tell about you. Your job is to live truthfully. And truth has a way of surviving. Maybe not immediately. Maybe not loudly. Maybe not dramatically. But eventually. And that is why you can release the fear. The truth about you does not need constant advertising. The truth about you can simply be lived. So tonight, wherever you are, remember this. Someone may have watched your life. Someone may have talked about your relationship. Someone may have tried to discover your secrets. Someone may even have hired another person because they were too afraid to ask you directly. But none of that changes who you are. You are still here. You are still growing. You are still capable of love. You are still capable of faith. You are still capable of beginning again. And the most shocking truth may not be what the spy discovered about you. It may be what you discovered about yourself. You can survive without chasing. You can love without begging. You can forgive without returning. You can walk away without hatred. You can lose someone without losing yourself. You can be misunderstood without becoming bitter. You can be alone without being abandoned. And you can move forward without knowing exactly where the road leads. That is faith. That is courage. That is the beginning of freedom. So if your heart has been heavy, put down the weight tonight. You do not have to carry every question. You do not have to solve every mystery. You do not have to investigate everyone who investigated you. You do not have to become obsessed with who said what. Protect your mind. Protect your heart. Protect your peace. And let God handle what is beyond your control. If someone is truly meant to return, you will not have to destroy yourself to make it happen. If someone is truly meant to stay, they will learn how to respect the person you are becoming. And if someone is not meant to stay, their departure does not mean your life has lost its meaning. It means one chapter has ended. And another one can begin. The person who hired the spy may never tell you what they discovered. The spy may never tell you everything they saw. The person who misunderstood you may never admit they were wrong. And that is okay. You do not need their confession to know your worth. You do not need their apology to choose peace. You do not need their return to believe that love exists. You do not need their approval to keep going. You already have enough reason to move forward. You are still alive. You are still capable. You are still becoming. And your story is not finished. So stand up inside your spirit. Dry your eyes. Release the obsession. Release the fear. Release the need to know every hidden conversation. And step into the next chapter with your head high and your heart wiser. If you believe you are entering a season of peace, write, "My peace begins now," in the comments. Not because a comment controls destiny. But because sometimes you need to say the decision out loud so your own heart can hear it. My peace begins now. My healing begins now. My wisdom begins now. My boundaries begin now. My future begins now. And from this moment forward, I will not chase what refuses to choose me. I will not beg for what should be given freely. I will not sacrifice my dignity for temporary attention. I will not allow another person's confusion to become my permanent home. I will love with wisdom. I will forgive with boundaries. I will trust God with what I cannot control. And I will keep walking. Because the person who was being watched is no longer the same person. The person who was being judged is no longer begging to be understood. The person who was being underestimated is no longer waiting for permission to rise. And perhaps that is the truth nobody expected the spy to discover. You were never as powerless as they thought. You were simply becoming powerful in silence. And now your silence is becoming peace. Your peace is becoming strength. Your strength is becoming wisdom. And your wisdom is becoming the foundation of the life you are about to build. Keep going. Do not look back just because someone behind you finally noticed your value. Look forward. There is more ahead. And whatever happens next, remember this one final truth. No person has the authority to decide the value of your life. No rejection can erase your worth. No betrayal can cancel your future. No rumor can rewrite your character. No hidden conversation can determine your destiny. And no one who tried to control your story can control the ending. You still have a choice. Choose peace. Choose truth. Choose wisdom. Choose faith. Choose yourself. And keep walking.